So there's a time along with my engineering job was doing Nala STEM, was doing IncrediPaul, also doing one consulting. So basically like four different jobs in one. So had an intern for the summer, all of that at the same time. So that was a big shift I made really from the beginning of the year, having all those four things to ending the year, really just focusing in on IncrediPaul and my engineering job, understanding that I really love what I do as an engineer and IncrediPaul is my passion, is my mission. And being an engineer helps me to unlock that passion. Maybe one day, if that's what God wants, I will do IncrediPaul full time and do only that. But as far as everything I'm doing right now, there's not really anything I can't do, especially with podcast. I've been more focused on the podcast and I've been able to do a lot of stuff with podcasts. The speaking side, as that expands and I get to do more of that, that might lend itself that I have to focus more on Paul. But until that happens, I'll continue to do both.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Faronbi, aka IncrediPaul, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where I talk to incredible people doing incredible things so we can become the most incredible versions of ourselves. Thank you so much for listening, but I also want you to know that you can also watch this episode on YouTube. But regardless if you're listening or watching this episode, thank you so much for your support. So 2 things I need to tell you before I dive into the episode. First off, pick up the Be Incredible Starter Pack. Why? Has a leadership masterclass, has a budget and resume template, and interview guide. All of that completely for free. It is all the things you need to jumpstart all the ways to be incredible, all the stuff I'm about, whether it is on the leadership side, your finances, and landing a job in this job climate. Really crucial right there. So all of that's completely for free. Go to incredipaul.org/start. The other thing is, for those of you watching on YouTube, you see me wearing all the IncrediPaul merch all the time, whether it's this hoodie, the hats I wear, the shirts, long sleeves, short sleeves, sometimes polos, all the things. The reason I talk about it is because everything I do with IncrediPaul podcast is completely for free, offer it all for free. The merch is just a way that you can help support the podcast and all I do. If you have ever got anything from what I've shared or guests have shared, pick up some merch and show people that you are all about being incredible. Today is a solo episode, and you already saw from the title, talking about reflection. And so this episode specifically is reflecting on 2025. I thought about reflecting on the last few years with the podcast, and I think I'll do that maybe more so in another episode sometime in 2026. But 2025, I've done this the last couple of years, really reflecting on the year, what has gone well, what has not gone well. And I think it's really crucial that we take the time to step back and reflect. So real time recording this episode 2 days after Christmas and also 2 days before it's going to come out, which usually I record episodes anywhere from a month to 2 months in advance sometimes, especially for the interviews. I mean, more intentional about the solo episodes, trying to record them more close to the date that they're coming out, and then interviews kind of slot them in where it makes the most sense. So had an incredible time with family. They were all here in Nashville. I was able to show them around, do different things, see different light shows, just immerse in the music that is Nashville, and just spend time with each other and eat, which eating is one of my love languages. I know if you read the book 5 Love Languages, you might say that that's not one of them, but I have a 6th love language, which is eating. Very much live to eat. I do not eat to live. Anyone who knows me personally or has worked with me knows this very well. I was probably laughing at what I'm talking about because I very much love all things food. And so we got to do that as a family, and my mom was able to make a lot of her food. I was going to help with it. And she's like, no, I'm bringing all of it. or I'm going to make it while I'm at your house. And just a blessing to have her and then all my siblings and my dad as well. Just a lot of great time spending with them and just spending more time with them as a whole. I think this year I got to spent more time with them this year than I did last year. I got to go home for over the 4th of July as well as Thanksgiving and then came here for Christmas. The other thing is I was so happy about the weather in Nashville. The weather being really the highs in the 70s, sometimes mid 70s over the last few days. By the time this episode is coming out, it's going to be like in the 30s. But for now, it is in the 70s still for one more day, and I will live it up, even though it's been kind of gloomy. But that was kind of a sidebar, but really very much in the moment, in holiday season, reflecting, just being intentional about all the blessings that God has given me this year, as well as all the things I've learned as well. But really, this episode is focused on reflection on what has happened, and then I'll share a little bit about what's I'm focusing on moving forward. The next episode will be more focused on what I'm doing moving forward, as well as some other things that brought me up until this point that I'll share some more clarity on. But really, this year, I really dove deeper into IncrediPaul and what the brand looks like and the business as a whole. I've been doing IncrediPaul for over 5.5 years now. So it started April of 2020, launched it in the middle of COVID. Everything has slowed down. And over the years, it has really evolved what IncrediPaul has looked at. So I've done this and I kind of went back to my roots with some of the stuff in IncrediPaul. When I first started doing it, I was doing more stuff around career coaching. And this year I got to do more of that. Working with One Salting, as I mentioned, and was contracted with them, was able to really dive deep into that. And that was a lot of fun. But what I realized is really my mission and purpose expands well beyond career coaching and it's really more about overall self-improvement. So I actually made a decision to just take a step back from that, at least pausing for now during the end of the year. Maybe at some point I'll come back to it, but diving deeper into what it really means to build out my brand as opposed to someone else's, and then also bring along people to do that as well. So with that, let's talk about even how the year even started. Lots of traveling this year, actually not as much as last year, which is surprising. That just shows how much I traveled last year. It's just as far as my engineering job, I didn't travel as much. And then for speaking, I travel a little bit less as well. But that was just with the nature of some of the things that were happening in the DEI space. So I've mentioned in the past, maybe for those of you who haven't or is your first time listening or you haven't seen those episodes, I'm the founder of the National Alliance for the Acceleration of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, so NALA STEM, exists to unite, support, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM. And so since the inauguration of our current president, DEI has been under attack. I think I talked a little bit about it. Anyone who knows me knows how I feel about DEI, how passionate about it. And even all the research shows that DEI makes companies and organizations so much better. It has been under attack, and there's a lot of work that my organization was doing and is doing to build community, especially in different universities with the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. So it was definitely been a difficult year for that. Just navigating what it means as those grants have been canceled and just trying to provide hope in a difficult time. And even with that, like it was unrelated, but it just ended up happening was me taking a step back from Knowledge STEM. So still involved in it, more behind the scenes, no longer actively leading it. Still the founder, still work with the president right now, who is Anna Chicas, and she is an incredible leader. And we're just working through, actually, she's working through, and I'm more supporting what it looks like going forward. So that's been, I think that's probably the biggest change this year is over the last few years. I had Nala, Sem, and IncrediPaul hand in hand. And a lot of times I would put IncrediPaul on the back burner to focus on Nala STEM. I really didn't pour into it as much as I could have because I was really passionate about both and really passionate about Nala STEM. Not to say that I'm not passionate about it anymore, but what I've realized is that some of the reasons why I didn't pour into IncrediPaul, and this is just growing and learning more about myself, is that it felt selfish in the sense that IncrediPaul had my name attached to it, and I didn't want to be seen as someone that was doing stuff for myself. But realizing that everything I do with IncrediPaul really has, I mean, it has stuff to do with me. I'm talking about my experiences, but it's really all about empowering Gen Z professionals to be the most incredible versions of themselves. So yeah, it has my name Paul in it, but it expands beyond that. And you see that with different companies that had the founder's name in it. So whatever reason, so earlier this year, I realized that that was something that was holding me back. I didn't really fully pour into IncrediPaul as much as I could have or wanted to, and so I had a conversation about what it looks like for me to take a step back. And that's what I've done. And so we've been navigating that, the transition. And Anna has been taking the lead on all things knowledge STEM. And I've been focusing more on IncrediPaul as well. I was doing stuff with One Salting, like I mentioned, career coaching. So there's a time along with my engineering job, was doing knowledge STEM, was doing IncrediPaul, also doing One Salting. So basically like 4 different jobs in one. Also had an intern for the summer, all of that at the same time. And so obviously like the amount of time I spent on it was reduced based on the time I could actually spend. We only had 24 hours in a day. So that was a big shift I made really from the beginning of the year, having all those 4 things to ending the year, really just focusing in on IncrediPaul and my engineering job, understanding that I really love what I do as an engineer, and IncrediPaul is my passion, is my mission, and being an engineer helps me to unlock that passion. Maybe one day, if that's what God wants, I will do IncrediPaul full time and do only that. But as far as everything I'm doing right now, there's not really anything I can't do, especially with podcast. I've been more focused on the podcast, and I've been able to do a lot of stuff with podcasts. The speaking side, as that expands and I get to do more of that, that might lend it itself that I have to focus more on IncrediPaul. But until that happens, I'll continue to do both. So I got sidetracked a little, but at the beginning of the year, a couple different speaking engagements. So was able to go to Birmingham for the Black Male Summit. That was an incredible opportunity. Got to be on a panel there. Also went to Science Symposium, the Illinois LSAM Symposium in February in Chicago. Got to lead a session there. I just reconnect with people that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. I wasn't able to go last year, but I was there in 2023, and that was great. And then in April, I was in Kansas for their science symposium that was hosted by president of NALA, Anna Chicken-Promoter. And that was a really great conference, really great opportunity. But then right after the conference is when we found out about all the different grant cancellations of the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. So a lot of stuff we were working through and just trying to figure out how we're going to move forward. And that really just dove right into from April into May. I had an intern for the summer at the end of May, and even really April, even before then, was getting all this stuff prepared for her to have her project and things like that. So as far as traveling for speaking, I would say like maybe 5 times this year. The highlight was definitely the National Society of Black Engineers in New Orleans, my first time in New Orleans. That was an incredible experience. Really enjoyed that. I got to talk about leadership and leading beyond titles, really navigating leadership for young professionals. So the talk I've given before, but every time I give it, it's slightly different because I really want to hone in and get feedback from the audience and have it be more like a workshop style than keynote style. Because I'm definitely someone that feeds off of the energy of the audience. If the audience doesn't have energy, I can definitely bring it, but I want to make sure whatever I'm talking about is what they want to hear or what they're ready to hear as well. So that's something I'm really intentional about. So that kind of talks more about the speaking side of things. So that was really exciting. Also, got to travel about once a month for work. So it wasn't as much as last year. I think last year is closer to 40%. This year is closer to about 25% travel for work. But the highlight as far as the engineering, research and development, the city that was my favorite to travel to was Toronto. So I have a site that's about 35, 40 minutes from downtown Toronto. So I was there for a week from some work that we were doing. And it just so happened to be the week that Toronto Blue Jays were in the World Series. And I got to go to game 6 of the World Series, which also was a Friday. It was on Halloween. It was an incredible experience, to say the least, a bucket list type of activity. I will say it was not cheap by any means, but I was still able to do it. And that also lends itself into a key thing I learned from 2025 is being intentional about doing things for myself and really understanding what I need from relationships too. So my podcast is not focused on relationships, at least not in the more intimate personal relationships, more like leadership relationships. I'll talk briefly about it because I've mentioned before, really navigating a divorce last year and really navigating single life. Really more so earlier this year into the summer was opened myself up more to dating and just seeing what was out there. Because really before that, conversations with my therapist were just to focus on myself and just healing, which healing is a process, but that in itself, understanding that as someone who is an a recovering people pleaser. I just have to be really intentional about the people that I have in my life because I really am the person that likes to pour in and I'm a giver, not necessarily a taker. I can receive as well, but I'm a giver in any relationship I'm in, whether it's more friendships or more intimate relationships. So I've just been really intentional about the people that I have in my life. And not to say that I cut people off. In the past, I have been known to do that in smaller ways, but there's something that I'm just being intentional about the best way to do things and make sure that I am making time for myself. Because as you already learned, all the things I was doing between consulting and IncrediPaul and engineering work and all of STEM, I'm someone who's always busy, but I also have been very intentional really over the last year and a half, especially to make time for myself. So even though I've been busy, I've been productive, I've also had a lot of fun this year, just a lot of different things. The World Series is definitely the highlight, but there's been a lot of other things I've just gone and done. I think one thing that I can mention is just really learning how to process grief and understanding that grief is a language. I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I think it's something that's really critical that I learned went to the experience is really the best way to describe it, called We Go On tour. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a last minute thing. I saw one of the people I follow on Instagram. She does a lot of stuff as far as podcasts, Jessica Hurley, and she had posted on the fact that she had tickets for this. I just randomly, I was like, you know what? I have time. Like, see if I can get one of these tickets. And then she responded back. I said I would go. And then a few days later was able to figure out, okay, am I driving my car? Am I getting a rental, getting a hotel, all of these things. That experience of the We Go On tour, an experience because it wasn't necessarily a concert, yet there was music, there was spoken word, there was just overall healing and just talking about what grief truly is, talk about grief as a language. And it's one thing that we don't talk about enough is that everyone in life is going to experience grief of some sort, whether it's tangible grief or intangible grief. Some of the grief that I was working through was more intangible when you lose a partner or you lose a spouse, not in the physical sense, but you just lose that relationship where people can often resonate more with that when you lose a person. And so I learned some key things just to how to talk about grief and not saying that grief is a process or necessarily a language. And you have to learn how to speak the language and being able to impart some of that wisdom to others and just being intentional with how I even engage people who are grieving. And this, I wasn't going to talk about it, but that kind of leads into some stuff that I've been grieving over the last month with losing a friend that I had met last year. And we had talked for a little bit and they lived out on the East Coast and thought potentially there'd be something there. But just based on the fact that long distance was just not in the cards for us, where decided that we would just remain friends and leave it at that. And then that friend ended up passing away in early November, and it really hit me harder than I thought it would. And it's something that I'm honestly still understanding how to navigate, because it's one of those things is that you just never expect it. And I always had that back of my mind that maybe potentially in the future things would work out. But cancer sucks, and she died from cancer at a fairly young age. And it's just one of those things that I'm being really intentional. And it's reminded me about the fragility of life. And as this episode is reflecting, the understanding that tomorrow isn't promised. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's really critical that we are taking the time that we have with our friends, our family, our loved ones, and not taking it for granted. So that's something that I've already been intentional about. I know it's not my first time losing someone close to me to cancer. Unfortunately, I lost an uncle to that. I had a really close friend, like right after I graduated from college, lost to cancer, as well as so it's been a recurring theme for whatever reason. I don't know what's been going on. It seems like cancer is becoming more and more prevalent. I know there's more research and things like that. But that was a little bit of a tangent, like talking about grief, but really understanding that life is precious. We need to be intentional on how we approach life, what we want from life as well. So that is something that I'm always intentional when I'm talking to anyone, whether it's friends or even any future potential relationships, is just understanding that what do you want from life? What do I want from life? Are there synergies there? Are there not? Because if there's not synergies, like you just don't want to waste someone else's time. You don't want to waste your time. At the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. So that was a little bit on a tangent on relationships, which is not really the focus on this podcast, but living in a moment and just going off script there because I have some notes here in front of me, but that was not on there. So you got a bonus there as far as that. But a key thing I really learned this year is just how to be happy in any circumstances. And so I navigated a lot of tough things last year and even this year there were more things that were going on, whether it was not being able to sell my condo still, but fortunately was able to find a renter again. And that's like a whole other thing with HOAs, which is like honestly become like a triggering word for me because they just have not done the right process to do things. I won't get into that. Maybe at some point, not the time or place for it. Between that and then just finding opportunities, whether even if it's just little things to be happy, but also stay disciplined as well. So I'm very a disciplined person, but I'm also learning that it's important to make sure I do find little things for myself that are happy. And also whether it's with family, spending time with friends, or just doing nothing, just being really intentional about it. So with that, I have been focusing more on podcasting, which you're like, Paul, you've been podcasting for almost 4 years now. Yeah, I've been podcasting for 4 years, but I've been more on the interview side. I've been interviewing, at this point, interviewed over 100 people, maybe 110 people. This episode 147. And this year I've been doing more solo episodes because I just felt like there's things I needed to dive deeper into and just hear for my voice to come out more. So since May, I've been putting out solo episodes every other week, and that's going to continue into 2026. And then even for the beginning of 2026, going to kick it off with another solo episode and dive a little bit deeper about what are the things that I'm super excited about doing. And one of the things I kind of hinted at earlier, I always say that the mission of IncrediPaul is a part of young professionals, but now I'm being specific about saying Gen Z professionals and really been able to pilot this ambassador program, which I talked briefly about in the last solo episode. And about 5 of them right now, looking for 5 more, but being really selective. And I told them this, it's gonna be application based, and I don't have to have 10 ambassadors. There's things that they can help with and things to be a part of, but I'm limiting it because I want to make sure whoever is an ambassador is someone that is really bought into the mission of IncrediPaul and how passionate I am about it. And it's really a win-win. Is I'm pouring into this smaller group of people, and then they're getting behind the scenes look into all things IncrediPaul, supporting a variety of different ways, learning new skills, learning more about leadership, being tapped into my network. So my network has always been fairly good, which is one reason why I wanted to start a podcast. And from starting a podcast, my network has only grown. And there's just a lot of incredible people that I'm in contact with that I don't always do the best about reaching back out. And that's something in 2026 I want to do more with that network and highlighting them, doing more things, being able to give back more and just be incredible with that network, and then also connect more people too. So I do it from time to time, but in 2026, really from today on, but there's only a few days left in 2025. So 2026, being more intentional about building those connections and doing more. Another key thing as I kind of wrap things up, because it's a longer solo episode, but I thought it was fitting because it is the last episode of the year. And I didn't release an episode last week because I took it off for Christmas. And I felt it was a good opportunity for that. Is I really understood and learned how much authenticity is critical for me. I always knew it intrinsically, but I never was put into words. And I really can reflect back to the episode I did with Tiffany Parker, episode 138, and go back to that and talk about what are the things you really value. And for me, it's authenticity, which I think a lot of people, we value authenticity, we gravitate towards it. But for me, I think it's a little bit deeper than that, in that it bothers me when I feel that someone is not authentic, almost at a stage that it makes me sick. It's hard to describe. So when I feel like someone is not being authentic or just being dubious or all these different things, it's hard for me to overlook. And I just have to just get myself out the situation. And there's been things that have happened over the years and even this year that I've had to work through it and just understand that there's only so much I can control and control my controllables and leave the rest to God. But the key thing there with authenticity, really understanding that I want to show up and be the same person, whether you see me on the podcast, you see me on the street, you see me in my engineering job, and really comes to my life mission is I want someone to be better after interaction with me, and better in the sense that it might be that you learned something. It might be that I lifted your mood and lifted your spirit. I made you laugh. But my goal, as much as possible, is to be an addition to someone, not a subtraction. And so that's why, whether it is in my engineering job, whether it's the stuff I do in IncrediPaul, the stuff I've done with Knowledge STEM or at One Consulting, is I want to make sure that I'm leaving a positive impact. Obviously, I'm not always going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. There's going to be misunderstandings. I'm always going to own up to it. I want to be intentional. And that's one way that I continue to be incredible. So for those of you who have been listening to the beginning of the year, thank you so much for your support. For those of you, this is your first time listening, thank you for finally joining the podcast family. And I hope you have a great end of 2025. And let's make 2026 our most incredible year yet.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible.